Today I'm going to talk about being perfectly bilingual. 오늘은 제가 이중 언어로 완벽하게 영어와 한국말 할 수 있는 거에 대해서 얘기해 보려고 해요. Of course, this entire video is going to be in English, but I wanted to flex a little bit, speak in Korean to prove that I am probably not perfectly bilingual, but somewhat bilingual. Start things off. It's phenomenal. Being multilingual in general is an amazing benefit to be had, an amazing feeling, especially in this age of globalization. Of course, speaking English, by far, I think, is the most powerful thing you can have in this world, and it will continue to be important. Culture is very English-driven. TikTok, internet, YouTube, dominated by English. Code is in English. AI is being dominated and English-driven. But having an extra language, especially if you didn't make any conscious effort to do it, is a great feeling. I want to give a shout out to my parents, my motherland, and my somewhat effort to watch Korean dramas and listen to Korean music over the past 25 years to keep this up. Brief history of my life. I was born in Korea, finished first grade, came over when I was 7, and have been in the United States ever since. I think it's a very optimal timeline to be bilingual enough. Granted, to fire a couple cheap shots, I know plenty of people that have come in similar timelines that are not as great as me in Korean, but also not as great as me in English. And I don't necessarily think that's completely due to my natural ability. A lot of it is circumstantial. I thank my parents for speaking Korean at home. I thank my mom for being home. I think my younger brother, who's 10 years younger than me, who's born here, who speaks Korean almost as well as me, also speaking only to me in Korean. Big benefit of speaking Korean, not just being overall great and feeling great that you have this ability to be bilingual and to speak Korean, is the access to culture that you get from language. Language is the first barrier to entry into any culture. Of course, you can go to a country, explore the various things in that country, learn it through videos and meet people. But if you don't understand the language, the first gateway or the key into this culture, it's very limiting, especially in this content-filled world where there's videos and films, documentaries, dramas, music, and most importantly, people that you access to language, which is heavily tied to culture. It's almost impossible to fully embrace culture without understanding its language. Speaking Korean has provided me an access to culture that I am geographically removed from, especially a pretty entertainment, content, well-versed, advanced culture, Korea specifically. But in general, the ability to connect with Koreans outside of Korea is unbelievably strong, and having that cultural bond is phenomenal. And I feel like whenever I go anywhere, even in the States, and I meet someone that can speak Korean, even though they're not necessarily Korean, there is a bond that I have with them that people that don't speak Korean don't have. Context in bilingualness is very important. And what I mean by that is when I say I'm perfectly bilingual, I'm not perfectly bilingual. My English is probably objectively far better than my Korean, simply because the amount of opportunity or the types of opportunity that I've had in speaking Korean has been limited. For example, over the past 25 years, the most I've spoken Korean is with my parents. I think a lot of that is becoming caught up by me going to a Korean church, for example, here. And for the first time almost ever, I have Korean peers in my age group, under my age group, and above my age group that I speak Korean freely with. And I found myself at limitations or borders and barriers that I can't get over or just yet because I haven't spoken Korean in regards to this specifically. I'll give a church example or a work example. I'm not very good at speaking about church things or Christianity things or NFT things or finance things in Korean because I've never done that myself, but I've also never heard anyone do it themselves. I've done it over podcasts and I've done it over the series of time. I've gotten better at it, but I've never had conversations, sophisticated conversations, and understand the correct language behind it. So context is very important. When someone says they're bilingual, they're probably selectively bilingual, depending on what context you're speaking in. There's one interesting caveat, an interesting difference. There's a voice differential. I don't know if you caught it in the beginning of the video, but when I speak Korean and when I speak English, I probably should have done that in two languages. When I speak English and 내가 한국말 할 때, the voice is 약간 달라요. They're a little different. And I've heard specifically for Korean that Korean's a higher pitch language and English is a lower pitch language. I've heard feedback from my friends from my already low enough voice that when I speak English, it's a little deeper. When I speak Korean, it's a little higher. I also have heard feedback that when I speak Korean, I sound younger, if not childish sometimes, probably because that's where my official Korean language education stopped. And when I speak English, it's adult-like because I've had experience being an adult. So long story short, there is a big, substantial, noticeable voice differential when you do it. What age you start understanding each language, I think also has an effect at what age the confusion starts happening. I'm probably not as bright as I was when I was 13. And when I first was introduced to English, I didn't know a single thing. I had needed a Post-it to tell my teacher I need to go to the bathroom. Now I am fluent. But I think as my English increased, my Korean probably definitely decreased. There are moments where I am stuttering often. I have to think about what I'm saying. When oftentimes English, I don't really think about what I'm saying, as you could tell. There are moments that are happening more and more as I get older, especially recently, that I've recognized that I need to make a conscious effort to be good at Korean as opposed to English. I think one fundamental thing that is mandatory, that is required to keep this up, is to have this be spoken at home. I've given my parents a shout out in the beginning, including my brother. You have to have someone that constantly speaks it without conscious effort to be able to keep this up in any language. I took Spanish for a bit in high school, and I became somewhat fluent, conversational for a while, because I went to Mexico every month to serve at a local church there for a missionary, and I became quite fluent, not because of my Spanish 3 teacher, shout out to Senor Barahona, great man, but simply because I was in constant contact with actual Spanish speakers speaking Spanish in Mexico. In fact, this was interesting when I came to the DR last summer, or when I went to the DR. They told me that I had a Mexican Spanish accent and asked me what part of Mexico I learned Spanish from. So clearly the interactions that you have build over time and almost induces you into speaking a certain type of that language. Again, thank you to my parents, thank you to my brother, and thank you to my church right now for continuing to increase this ability to speak Korean. I think largely being able to be bilingual has unlimited perks. Definitely no negatives. I have thought about whether or not there would have been a difference if I spoke English at home. I'm sure there's some limitation that I hopefully surpassed while in college and while during work in talking with adults in English. A lot of my English was limited to my peers or my teachers, and I will never experience speaking English to my parents the same way that you may have experienced speaking English to your parents. And I think there has to be some level of a contextual difference that I have limitations on how I speak English in that regard. As I've expressed in other videos, I think among my few talents is definitely language, and language does come easier to me than others. But even then, I think context does matter. I think as we go towards a world of globalization, being bilingual is almost becoming a bare minimum. Again, I think speaking English is more than enough. It gets you far and above most people who can't speak English. But it does help to have access and be a gateway point to multiple cultures beyond just your own. If I had all the time in the world, I think I would take an immense amount of time to fully take advantage of the talents that I have and learn new languages and use that as gateways to new cultures and become a jack of all trades, jack of all cultures, and use language as the opening door key to whatever culture I want to access. I want to truly thank, again, if they're watching, my parents and my brother for allowing me to be bilingual, enabling me to be bilingual. Thank the motherland of Korea for having such a beautiful, wonderful language that allows me to have access to a phenomenal culture. I implore / encourage you to become bilingual if you're not, sustain bilingualness if you are, try being trilingual if you can. And as always, 봐주셔서 감사하고, thanks for watching. 구독, 좋아요, 알람 설정, subscribe, like, and turn on notifications, which I've never said in any other videos. I guess it's a Korean thing. And I will see you guys next time. 다음에 봐요. Let's go.